I told them to wrap the child up, so somebody stay with the child and move it over to the temporary morgue because we have two more coming out, and one of them, they're screaming, is going to be another kid. People were flooding out of the building. They were running for their lives. I had worked an overnight shift and I had met another friend for breakfast. And I had never gone to breakfast after I worked an overnight shift because I always felt like crap and I wanted to go home. But I met him and the bomb went off. And so I wasn't far from the bomb. And so I moved towards the federal building. When I stepped out of the door, it was like paper was falling everywhere and debris, almost like snow. As I stepped out of the door, a man pointed to the federal building because I think the federal building just collapsed. I made my way to the building very quickly. As I was running down the street, the cars were crushed. It wasn't like what you'd think in the movies where the cars, when a bomb explodes, the cars go flying up in the air. It wasn't that at all. It just the shockwave just crushed the cars flat. And then there was a lot of glass in the street. And so ran up the street and I got to the side that had been bombed out and there was nothing. I thought the building at that moment had actually been vacant and that it was a gas explosion. I made my way around to the front in a few moments, and that's where it was. People were just starting to come out of the building, and most of them would walk a few yards, kind of zombie-like, and then they'd either lay down or they'd fall down. A few made it to the curb, and there were two paramedics there. They had triage tags. And so we started running the triage there, and it quickly got very big with all the ambulances and fire, rescue, police, everybody. I said something about a gas explosion, and one of the firefighters was standing there, and he said, "This wasn't a gas explosion, this was a bomb." And I said, "How do you know that?" And he goes, "Gas explosions blow the asphalt in the street out. And he said, "But a bomb blows the asphalt in." And he said, the crater, the asphalt is in the bottom of the crater. He said, "This was a bomb." My real job was, we tried to put cervical collars on them. If they were bleeding, you'd put compression dressings, plus or minus oxygen, but then they would go. And they were taking two patients per ambulance, and it was, they went very quickly. A lot of lacerations, head injuries. One man had a lacerated trachea. It didn't get his vascular system, but it did get his trachea. And I intubated him because we had an adult intubation kit there. And so I intubated him. We'd work through some people you could keep because they weren't that critical, but they were being brought out on backboards. But the criticals were the ones you were trying to move out first because this was mass casualty. That's how we were running it. The girl had just a catastrophic head injury. I mean, catastrophic. And I tested her. She had no gag reflex. She had no corneal reflexes, and she had what we call negative doll's eyes. And so clinically, she suffered brain death. And I'm looking at this, and I'm on top of her. They can't see it. And I say, we can't do anything. Plus, there's another lady right next to me that had been hit so hard by the bomb, her blew all her clothes off. And so she had been turned into cannon fodder. And they both had what's called agonal breathing, which means they're both in the throes of death. And so I told them to wrap the child up, so somebody stay with the child and move it over to the temporary morgue because we have two more coming out, and one of them, they're screaming, is going to be another kid. So I moved to the lady, and then she was blown to pieces. I mean, she was cannon fodder. And she had massive facial and what I thought was head trauma. And she was taking maybe one agonal breath every 25 seconds. And now the next person comes in, they're laying them down, and they're going to make it to the hospital. I can look over and see that they're going to survive to get to a hospital. And so I say, we're going to wait on her. She's not going to survive to get to the ambulance, let alone get to the hospital. So I'm going to move to this next person. And a firefighter reached over me with what's called an ET tube, which is an endotracheal tube. And he said, try one time to intubate her. So I had to rake a lot of debris off, and she had broken her face off her skull, and that's called a Lefort 3 fracture. And so her face is no longer attached to her skull, her calvarium, and she has her paradoxical breathing. Her face is moving the opposite direction of her breathing. And so I just stick my finger down and lift her face up, and I insert the tube to 22 centimeters, and I just set everything down. And the firefighters didn't even try to touch the tube. They just picked the lady up and took off running for an ambulance. She survived, and I saw her about 8 or 9 or 10 months later. We met on TV, and her husband came up and got emotional with me. And he told me, he said, "You gave my wife and her life back to me." And he hugged me. But what he didn't know was that I was also the person he had hugged, was the person who had chosen more than likely to let his wife die. You literally had seconds to assess somebody and decide what you were going to do. And for a period of time, so maybe for, I don't know, maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, it was very intense. That first 2 hours was very intense on the triage side. I didn't know there was a daycare there, but the firefighter that brought Bailey Allman out, she was the first child brought out, and she was the first child fatality. As he came out of the building, we met eyes, and we started walking towards each other. And I triaged Bailey in his arms, and she hadn't survived. And then after that, we started taking several children for a period of time. And people were flooding out of the building. They were running for their lives. So, you see all these people, and at first you don't know what's going on. And somebody starts screaming, "Bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb." And then that law enforcement and fire rescue came out, and they're moving quickly away from the building. And a cop ran up and made us leave. That we were there, and we had patients, and we were waiting for ambulances, and everybody had to leave. We had to evacuate 1 mile out. Now I had to go into the building several times, and they called me in when the young lady had her leg trapped underneath all the debris, and it wasn't going to come out. I went and looked. They wanted me to figure out what to do, and I could tell that she was not coming out with the lower part of her leg. There must have been, my God, 50 tons of concrete on it. And so I couldn't get cell phone reception. I was going to go try to call an orthopedic surgeon at the University of Oklahoma to come over. And as I went outside to see if I could get cell phone service, there was an orthopedic surgeon standing right there, and a general surgeon. It was like God had put those two doctors right there for that young lady. I mean, it was amazing. So I let them back in, which getting to her was a feat because the inside of the building was decimated. You had to climb over stuff and around stuff and to get to where she was. As a third-year resident, you work the entire year at night. And so after it happened, I had to go back to work the next day. I did a couple of interviews. I had to go back to work the next day, and then it's just back into the grind. You don't really have time to think about, and it stays with you, and you just finally have to make peace with it.